So Star Trek 4: The Voyage Home. So this one is probably my I would say it's probably the one that I'm most fond of. It may not be my favorite, but it's the one that I go back to when I think of what started me off on classic Star Trek. I really hated the original series because I always felt that it was corny. You know, every kid thinks their parents' stuff is corny, so I associated the original series with corniness of my parents. But this movie was my very first Star Trek movie that I had watched. You know, it was on VHS at the time, and at the very beginning of it, it had that you know trailer for Star Trek: The Next Generation, and it was just a fun movie. You know, I didn't understand, that it was a fish out of water story. It was just a fun story for me. Um, I didn't really realize that. Wait, they're not on the Enterprise. To me, it was just, it was a bunch of, it was the Enterprise characters. None of that stuff made much sense to me. It was just a fun story, and that to me is where I feel like that. When you can write a story that's easily accessible to any wide range of audiences, that's when you have a good story, and that's where Star Trek 4 succeeds. And that's the hope of every movie, is to be as accessible as possible. For me, I was around 7 or 8 years old, I think, when I first saw it. I think it was about 8 years old, and I would watch it over and over and over again, because it was just, I loved it. My mom would clean the neighbor's house across the street, and they always had Star Trek. They had the first four Star Trek movies on VHS, and I would always watch Star Trek 4: The Voyage Home, while my mom would clean their house. So it was, to me, it was always a treat to go over there, because it was the cool movie at the time, because I loved Star Trek, The Next Generation, and this was a big movie. I didn't care that it was Kirk and Spock. I was just like, this is a fun movie. It was entertaining. I loved the Bird of Prey. To me, it's still one of the most beautiful ships out there. Um, I love the fact that, like, they slingshot it around the sun, like they kept continuity from what was in the series. Yeah, I love the callback that they had for that. And the effect of the time travel shot, where you kind of see the clouds, and you see the faces coming up through those clouds of all the different characters and stuff. Like, it was just really weird. It was very trippy. I thought that was really well done, because you're not really sure what's going on or what you're looking at, and you're hearing the different voices of what hasn't happened yet, but you're traveling back through the timeline. It was a lot of weirdness there, where you're like, what? To me, it was very reminiscent of, like, Doctor Who type stuff. Um, but no, I really enjoyed it. I felt, especially after the first the Star Trek 2 being very serious, and having death, and then Star Trek 3 being, again, more or less serious, and then having the destruction of the Enterprise. I felt like you needed something like this, with a lot of lightheartedness to it, a lot of fun. Even though the stakes are probably higher than the other two films, with the destruction of Earth being at risk, and then possibly altering the timeline, which nobody really addresses that. But it's such a fun movie, and it doesn't take itself too seriously, and I think after those movies, you needed something like this. Of course, there's no big bad in the movie. The big bad is, I would, some people would say it's the probe. I don't think it's the probe. I think it's humanity's ignorance toward itself, which is something that we're, again, facing these days. It's almost like a constant thing going, I wonder why. But humanity's ignorance is the big bad, because we don't have the whales, and we cause the extinction and whatnot. It's got a good message behind it, a very positive message for, hey, we need to turn shit around, or we're going to lose something, and eventually we might turn around and need it. We might not have the time travel thing available. But this movie was really good, and at the end of the movie, Admiral Kirk, gets demoted to Captain Kirk. Puts him back to a spot where, he was happy, because the whole time when he's an admiral, he's been he's been unhappy. In Star Trek 2 he was unhappy. In Star Trek 3, of course, he's unhappy because he lost his friend. It's just the whole time it's been a time of adjustment for Kirk, and not a very good one. And this is the first time where you see Kirk actually adapt back to something where he was happy. And the president said it best when he said something where they're going to put him back in a position where he's basically excelled. And they're right. It sucks that in the next movie it kind of bombed, and it's not really a test of what the captain was, actually able to do. But in Star Trek 4 as a whole, it ends on a very uplifting note when the crew walk on the new USS Enterprise, the 1701A, which was the old Yorktown. Was it the old Yorktown? They it's to me, I know Uhura's technically in the wrong spot. It's very bright, like a bright white. It looks a little bit off, but it feels very optimistic. It feels very clean. So it feels fresh. It feels new. You got everybody in the spots where they technically should kind of be, even though the bridge is altered. But it looks good. It ends hopeful. And that's what you needed, for especially after going through Star Trek 2, Star Trek 3. You needed something to end hopeful. Everything's back where it should be. Especially where we were at Star Trek 2, Star Trek 3, you needed to put the pieces back where they were before you can continue the adventures. And this, it's not a perfect movie, but if you're looking just to have a good time, this is the perfect movie for that. So, but anyway, those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think. With that in mind, be genuine, be safe, and keep on geeking on, guys.